9-day trip that was 1,200 miles of camping. And I'd like to know how hard you had to twist her arm to convince her that was a good idea. But you talk about learning to get to know somebody. So I really appreciate all of you coming. This is a great crowd. So enjoy.
Thank you. Well, and the rest of the story is, this wasn't really our honeymoon trip, but our honeymoon trip 2 years earlier had been a canoe trip in some of this same territory up here. So this trip, that was, okay, I'll share my age. That was 1969, the honeymoon trip. This was 1971. And how do you come up with a crazy adventure like this? Let's see. Why don't we turn the projector on? Would that be a good idea? Can you hit the? There we go. There we go. So, how do you come up? You know, college students do crazy things, and so in. Gosh, has it been 60 years? 1965, I went to a 2-week field station, or 2 months field station up on the Boundary Waters Canoe area with Canoe College, and where we talked about, you know, we canoed in the Boundary Waters. We got to meet Sigurd Olson. How many of you know that name, Sigurd Olson? Anybody? Okay. We got to meet in person Sigurd Olson, and we were enthralled, or I was enthralled with the Boundary Waters. Well, our favorite biology prof at Canoe College, Robert Drexler, was the head of the field station, and he persuaded Margaret and another couple of friends of ours to go back to the field station. I worked there another summer in the Boundary Waters, and we were absolutely enthralled with the Boundary Waters in the that part of the country, and the history of the Canadian fur trade. There's a guy named Eric Morse said that the fur trade sort of unrolled the map of Canada, and that you know, Canada's got half the world's fresh water and thousands of miles of rivers and lakes and canoe trails, and so. After we had all been up there and kind of exposed to this idea, we said, you know, hey, that might be kind of a neat idea to follow some of the old routes. Anybody know the term Canadian Shield? Any geologists around here? Yeah, the Canadian Shield is a rock formation that pretty much, well, I'll show you where it goes. Whoop, let's see, too many buttons here. Which button shall I push? Okay, the Canadian Shield sort of runs along from Canada, you know, down sort of like this, and at the edge of that Canadian Shield, there's a lot of waterways that sort of follow that, and that was the waterways that we were following. Some of the early explorers, Alexander Mackenzie, actually started from Lake Superior and probably Montreal, who knows how much farther east than that. They went all the way up off the map to the Arctic Circle, up in the on the Mackenzie River. But our idea was to follow the historic route of the voyageurs, the fur traders. Well, there was a demand for furs in Europe, and there were a lot of furs up in the North Country, up in here, beaver especially. And the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company figured out a trading scheme where they would have Indians trapping furs up in this area, Lake Athabasca, Fort Chipewyan, up in this area. They would get the furs from the Indians. The voyageurs would bring them down this fur trade route all the way down to Lake Superior. Has anybody been to Grand Portage on the North Shore, Lake Superior? fascinating spot. So, but they would bring the furs down there to Grand Portage, and there they would meet with the people from the Montreal who were bringing provisions, supplies in from the east. And they would come and they would meet at Grand Portage. They'd have a big wild rendezvous there. They'd trade the voyageurs from the North Country would give the furs to the people from the east, and then the people from the east would give them their provisions, and then they would head back north. And they were all doing this trying to see if they could beat the winter, because when they started out up here in June, they'd have to come all the way down to Lake Superior and then get all the way back up before the ice could be September. So it was a real historic fur trade route. We decided we were going to start out at Lake Superior so we could start in May. Didn't have to wait too long for ice out. So that was kind of our plan, was to follow that Voyageurs Highway. So this is Montreal, where they had the big fur trade houses there at Montreal. So they brought the provisions from Montreal mostly along Lake Superior, and then they were going to head inland. Well, you get to Grand Portage. It's called Grand Portage for a reason, because to get from Lake Superior up to the inland waterways, you got to go up the Pigeon River. And there's about 3 sets of falls in the Pigeon River. And around that is a Grand Portage. It's about 8 or 9 miles long. So, and we portaged Grand Portage. This, let's see, how long of exposure do you suppose that picture was, Dave? About 60th of a second? That's about how long I could carry a pack, 2 packs like that. The Voyageurs would take 2 90-pound packs, and then they would go over the Grand Portage carrying those. And the reason they had the Voyageurs doing that is because they tried it with cattle and horses and oxen, and that didn't work. You had to have bodies, human bodies, to do it. So they'd have 8 or 9, I think about 8 trips they'd have to meet on Grand Portage. Yeah.
Larry, was the rivers flowing, that river flowing to Lake Superior, but like up above, or the Churchill River, does that go to the Hudson Bay then?
We'll get to that. Yeah, right. So there's the Pigeon River flows into Lake Superior. You get far enough up the Pigeon River, then you go over high land, and then the water flows to, well, ultimately to Hudson's Bay by way of Boundary Waters, Canoe, or Border Lakes, and Rainy River, and Lake of the Woods, and Lake Winnipeg. But there's a lot of different. How do I want to say? We went upstream a lot more than we went downstream, but we did have a little downstream paddling to go. So, but anyway, we portaged the Grand Portage, and we got to the place called Fort Charlotte. There was an old fort up there where the Voyageurs would meet after they had gone over the Grand Portage, and then they would start paddling on the Pigeon River. They say, well, most of the portages on the Pigeon River are pretty easy to find, or not. So we discovered. But it was about we actually started on the 13th of May. Whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but we started out up the Pigeon River, and another falls. This is Partridge Falls. We were trying to get around on the Pigeon River, and we got to a place that the Voyageurs always loved to stop, because one of the provisions they got from Montreal was a keg of rum. Well, you don't want to carry a keg of rum another 2,000 miles up in the wilderness, so they had to stop at this spot and figure out what to do with that keg of rum, and it didn't take them long. But kind of a neat historic spot. The Pigeon River in May, well, that May particular, it was a little bit high, a little bit fast, a little bit wet. Those portages some of them were easy to find and some of them were not. So we spent a solid week going not very far on the Pigeon River in the rain and the cold, and we were a little bit discouraged there. We were here hung up trying to get dried out a little bit, trying to have the reflector oven to warm up. I'm not sure if that's food in there. We're trying to dry out our socks, but well, we finally got up to what essentially the Boundary Waters canoe area, and started going more. Let's see. Well, not quite to the. Oh, I forgot to mention other spots on the Grand Portage, like this. But the Heidel Land Portage, when you get there, Jolene, is that focus okay? Can you see that? Look okay? Okay, good. But you get to the Heidel Land, then we're going downhill for a while after we'd been coming uphill on the Pigeon River. So, and one of the first things you do when you get to a sunny spot rock after being on a wet Pigeon River is to dry things out, so you can see all our sleeping bags and clothes and the bags of food that we were carrying here spread out to dry out. So, and this is kind of the traditional Boundary Waters canoe area scenery. You love that. A lot of people love to paddle that, and this was what we had been hoping for all the time. The Voyageurs, in the previous picture, my friend was portaging the canoe. The Voyageurs hated portages, so they would run them every chance. They run the rapids every chance they got, usually with pretty good success, or sometimes not. We, most of the time, were a little bit more conservative and tried to usually portage instead of shooting the rapids. I believe this was the rapids where that turned out to be a bad idea. Our friends actually didn't dump. They got down and there was a rock just under the surface, and they hung up on the rock and were hung there and couldn't get out at all. So I had to wade in the water down to my waist and get them off the rock and get them going again. We lucked out on that one for sure. So this is one of Margaret's favorite portages. There's all variety of portages. So, and again, after some of those days on those portages, the campfire in the evening, when you go up to Boundary Waters, that's what you're trying to do, is have a nice campfire on a rock at night. Well, that's the ideal. So, but we did, the time of year, a lot of things to see, like marsh marigolds and flowering dogwood, the baby, the bunchberries, orchids, moccasin flower orchids, some of the good old standard Iowa wildflowers like columbines. And this was the one that we really anticipated when we saw it, because we knew blueberries in the spring turned into edible blueberries later on in the summer. So we were ready for that. So, and blueberry pancakes, blueberry oatmeal, blueberry cobbler, handfuls of blueberries. So, along the international border, there were several places that are historic. This is Lac La Croix, which was in a voyage. It's a traditional old painting of Lac La Croix, and we had saw some of the same cliffs as we were paddling by those. The Native Americans centuries ago were fascinated by these cliffs, and for whatever reason painted rock or pictographs on the cliffs, and they're about eye level, so you assume they probably either sat in the canoe to do it or walked up there to do it. But a lot of those are still there, and people can still go see them. Now, some of you seen the pictographs on up in the Boundary Waters. It's worth a trip. Oh, well, modern rock painters are not quite as dedicated as the Native Americans were. The historic site, the rocks that, had been there for eons. This was Table Rock, which was one of the voyageurs' favorite campsites, so we had to stop at Table Rock. Don't think we camped there, probably just for lunch, but obviously hard to miss the historic site. The old voyageurs didn't have quite this luxury, and we didn't take advantage of it either, but along the border lakes, there are some commercial outfits at that time had engines rigged up that would pull your fishing boat over the portage for you. So we portaged, but we let the fishermen have their motorboats over the portage that way. So beautiful country. If you've been up there, it's this is the type of things you're looking for. The Voyageurs National Park was just getting started about that time, and one of the historic places at the Voyageurs National Park was the Kettle Falls Hotel, which was, I think, built in, early 1900s. And it's the funny thing about it, I guess funny, that they had some problems building it with the foundation. And so I sat my camera down on the table, and I realized that my camera was starting to slide off the table because. So they joked about that's how they rolled the drunks out the door, with the sliding down the floors of it. There was a woman there who, catered to people who stayed at the hotel, and she baked bread. I think she had 4 or 5 helpers, and they baked, a couple dozen loaves of bread a day. We were going to buy a loaf, and she just gave us a loaf. So that was one of our, we had found a lot of helpful, interesting, friendly people like that. So this is our more typical meal, though. Margaret cooking, we got cornbread already cooked, probably slab bacon in the skillet, the reflector oven there, which the cornbread just came out of, a pot of, might have been macaroni and cheese, or maybe soup, and pretty much wood fires most all the time. But we carried along the reflector oven and the wire grate to cook on. So now slab bacon, a lot of stores had slab bacon, which you could buy, and we did, and then we'd put it in the pack, at the bottom of the pack, so it would sit against the bottom of the aluminum canoe and stay pretty well, almost a week if you would scrape a little of the mold off, but it had a little fresh meat to eat. June in the Boundary Waters, has anybody been there for the black flies, the mosquitoes? Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to eat and cook, but we dealt with that too. So. Weather, all kinds of weather. Wind can be sometimes helpful, and we attempted a time or two to sail with rigging up the poncho. Seemed like in Iowa, my old rule of thumb is there's no such thing as a tailwind. We occasionally got a tailwind, but most of them it seemed like they were probably headwinds. So, civilization. Oh yeah. Well, we thought we were getting away from civilization, and then we got to International Falls, or this was actually Fort Francis. But we thought we had it made, because when we had been at the Canadian Ranger Station on Basswood Lake, he said, my buddy has a truck there, and when you get there, get to Fort Francis, give him a call, and he'll come give you a ride around. He gave us his phone number and his name and everything. So when we got to Fort Francis, we tried that. Didn't happen to get him the first time around. We finally did get the guy with his truck to come haul our canoes around the log booms and the pulp mills and the whatever. So, and he hauled us to a motel. It'd been, 3 weeks we'd been out already on the trail. We were ready for a motel and a bath and whatever. So he hauled us to the motel and took our canoes on down to the landing, which happened to be not too far below the sewage treatment plant. So the good news is the water now was going downhill and we were going with the water. The bad news was this was kind of what the water looked like. It wasn't very inviting water. So I'm told it's much better shape now at Fort Frances International Falls. It wasn't really a wilderness river either. A lot of livestock along the banks, and kind of like Des Moines River or some of the other big Iowa rivers. A little mud here and there. A little bit of wildlife in some backwaters along the let's see, that's the Rainy River. Rainy River, yeah. So, but we found some pastures along the Rainy River where you save the flower, Margaret.
Simple flower.
No. Anyway, a typical flower anemone you would find in Iowa in the pasture. And this was the owner of the pasture. Ron Kloosterman was his name. He happened to be originally from the Netherlands, I think, and had come over to start dairying here. And they'd been there a couple decades and had a pretty good milking operation going. Very friendly folks. They gave us some milk, and I think they gave us some eggs, and the little kids came down to watch us cook and stay in their pasture. And I think they had us. Oh, they gave us probably some meat. In fact, I remember that it was. You could sure tell that it was dairy beef and not grain-fed beef, but having been on the river for a while, that was just fine. So the next place, not too far on down, was the Charlie McDonald, whose family had homesteaded this area, I think 1892, if I'm not mistaken. And they had lived there since then, and they had just, the summer before, about 1970, they had gotten electricity, finally. And you'll never guess what the first thing they installed when they got electricity was an electric iron. Got to keep those pants nice and well pressed, huh? But they're friendly folks, and they invited us in for muffins and gave us some more food. So it was friendly folks to visit with. And then we came to Lake Superior, or Lake of the Woods, a little bit farther on down the way, and that is big water. There were some resorts near the mouth of the Rainy River and the big water out there, and interesting wildlife, I guess, all kinds of life out on the Lake of the Woods. We were paddling and saw the bear swimming between islands, and this was just about as close as the bear wanted us to get. He wasn't very happy when we pulled in for a picture. And real estate developers on Lake of the Woods, of course, and I don't know what's there now, if they're condominiums or what, but we, at the top end of Lake of the Woods, we pulled in on a Sunday afternoon to the town of Canoe. On a Sunday afternoon, and I think it was late June, early July, there were motorboats all over the place, and waves, and people, and probably jet skis.
No, water skis.
Oh, water skis, yeah. But we were headed for food. So we went up to the Safeway grocery store, which had boat docks there where we could pull up our canoe and go in and shop at the Safeway grocery store. So, which we did. And then went back out, and there was a little island out in the middle of the bay at Canoe. So we went out and managed to camp on the island to the roar of, I think, motorboats all night. We were close enough to town. It was not a secluded wilderness campsite by any means. So, but from Canoe, then we eventually got to the Winnipeg River, where we were following it on to the west, headed for Lake Winnipeg. So, beautiful river. In fact, the voyageurs said that this is one of their favorite rivers, was the Winnipeg. Right now, it's, 60 years ago or 70 years ago, they started damming it up for power. So, and civilization came to the Winnipeg River too. This was the Hudson's Bay Company, one of the first Hudson's Bay Company stores that we encountered. And we were always glad to see a Hudson's Bay Company store, because then you could get slab bacon. What else? You know, peanut butter and jelly, or those kind of things. This was on the Winnipeg River. Trivia question: who can identify the year, make, and model of that car there?
The Falcon. 68 Falcon.
Motor's car.
Yeah, and of course, in Canada, they used to have a Canadian version of a car and a U.S. version of a car. Whether I've been calling it, and nobody has called me wrong yet, the Canadian version of the Edsel, but who knows? So, but again, the beautiful country through the Winnipeg River, and we sometimes, because of the bad or windy weather during the day especially, sometimes we paddled into the evening until almost dark after the wind would go down. So that was, you know, it's not highly recommended you paddle after dark, but when it gets in twilight, the wind is less. So, paddling in the morning, you know, fog, that's not a problem, is it? You got a compass, you can tell where you're going. We thought. One morning we got up and said, well, it's pretty foggy, but we got the compass, so we started paddling, and after a while we said, that looks familiar. Maybe that was where we were camping before. So we kind of went in a circle. And this is what now a lot of the Winnipeg River looks like. There are, I think, 6 dams by Ontario Hydro, it's called. And they provide a dramatic amount of electricity for a lot of the province of Ontario. So we, of course, had the portage around up over those dams. At one of those, we met a kayaker who was eventually was going to be on his way, I think, to by a different route to Hudson's Bay. But he tagged along with us for a while, and then he decided that we were way too slow. He could go a lot faster in his kayak, so he just kept on going. So when we finally got to Lake Winnipeg, a couple things happened. Our friends who had started out with us decided that this was, are we having fun yet? And the answer was no. So they decided that they were going to head on back to Iowa. And we decided we really wanted to go on, and as it turned out, there would be a boat that would go up Lake Winnipeg that we could catch a ride on. But we had a couple days to wait for that, so we did a couple things like shopping for new pants, and a little wildflower photography, and just kind of looking around at the town. I think it was the town of Selkirk. And named for the Lord Selkirk, or, well, probably the boat was named for the town. But anyway, the Lord Selkirk would take you up Lake Winnipeg, which is about 300 miles, without having to paddle 300 miles on that very large, very dangerous big lake. So $47.50 a person, I think it was. Another $10 for the canoe. So we took our packs onto the Selkirk, and I guess we had a stateroom or something. We had a small cabin. The canoe went down in the hull, or in the hold. So it was a little bit of luxury. We met a couple of guys on this on the Selkirk who were also canoeists, and they said, we're going to celebrate by buying you some wine. So we had some wine on the boat, the Selkirk boat. So, and did such things as shooting trap off the fantail of the cruise boat on Lake Winnipeg. And I was a terrible shot then, and I'm still a terrible shot. I don't think I hit a one. That gull out there flying was lucky, because I couldn't hit it if I'd have tried. So we got up to the top end of Lake Winnipeg to a place called Grand Portage, or no, Grand Rapids, And at Grand Rapids, the Mines and Natural Resources Ranger met us there. And I think the captain of the boat had called ahead and said, hey, we got some people who might need a ride. So he came down and they hauled us up around the dam that had been built at Grand Rapids, I think in 1961. So we had to get past that dam. Well, he took us up and dropped us off at a campsite up on the reservoir above the dam. So we thought, oh, that's nice, helpful. So we got up there, built our campsite, put our little grate down not too far from the water, and cooked our supper, went to bed. Next morning got up and the water was up about 6 or 8 inches over our fire grate because they had closed some of the gates on the dam at Grand Rapids and the water was coming up. Fortunately, our tent was far enough up that we didn't get wet, but it was a sobering experience. So, and the birds there, I think a lot of them are Franklin gulls, maybe some Pat, what are those? There might be some black terns and some, but anyway, the flooded area had a lot of birds around, but the reservoir called Cedar Lake had been flooded, I think, like I said, 1961, about 10 years before, and it was just flooded timber for as far as you could see. So, and big water. In fact, big water, we were trying to say, okay, we got to paddle across, we'll spot an island or something and head for that. One day we were doing that and stopped out in the middle of the lake to take a break, have some water, some chocolate, and we said, what's that noise? Couldn't see anything, looked around. I finally got the binoculars and looked behind us, and I could see white caps coming. So we said, well, we got to get going. And so we paddled like crazy for the nearest land we could see. And we went crashing in to this island, with the waves bashing us. We nicknamed this Frustration Island because when we got there, we kept thinking, well, the wind will go down and we can keep going. Well, we spent 3 nights on Frustration Island before it finally went down enough that we could continue our travels. So it was, and we were lucky to get there and have a place to have a little bit of protection. So Cedar Lake flooded some Indian villages when it was built in 1961, and so some of the buildings were still there, but they were no longer occupied. But it was kind of interesting to search around some of those. And then we got farther up, well, out of Cedar Lake, it was actually a dam on the Saskatchewan River. So then we were going upstream again on the Saskatchewan River. And we, to a certain extent, compared it to going upstream on the Des Moines River. Not very exciting, entertaining place to go. So campsites were kind of few and far between. This one happened to be, we were paddling along between these big mud banks and happened to see a ladder kind of sticking over the edge. So I went over and pulled the ladder down and then climbed up, and lo and behold, there was a little clearing and a little cabin. So we left the canoe down by the water and carried the packs up the ladder so we could camp in a clearing up by the cabin. So a time or two, there wasn't a place to climb up, so we had to camp on the sandbar, the mud bar, amongst the willows. But it was a kind of a muddy river, let's put it that way. This little guy, we were paddling along, and all of a sudden I realized there was this little colt down right beside the river on a ledge of mud down there, high banks, and we never did figure out how or why he got down there, but he obviously needed rescuing. So we parked the canoe and I got out and wrestled with him a while and finally did manage to push him back up over the bank to his pasture. And I stuck my head up over and I never did see where the rest of the herd of horses was, but I hope he found his mom. So, but again, the Saskatchewan River was a lot of upstream going. So until we got to a place called Cumberland House, which was one of the, or was the first settlement, or European settlement in the interior. I think it was 1670 something. But anyway, we got to the Cumberland Lodge, and lo and behold, they had a cafe, they had a motel room, and so we stayed in the Cumberland Lodge rather than sleep out under our tent. So, and the town of Cumberland House was wide streets, heck, well, they didn't need much pavement, I guess, but boardwalks you could walk on. So, and not too far beyond that was a place called Sturgeon Landing. This is a post office, as there were quite a few post offices here and there along the way. And in fact, that's how we got, well, I had to send out my film when I was taking pictures. I only took 50 rolls of film with me, so every post office I had to send out some film. But we also had made arrangements ahead of time for people, our families, to send us mail and hold for arrival at Sturgeon Landing. So in most cases, that worked out pretty well, that we would get there and there would be a letter or two waiting for us, which was kind of a good way to keep in touch with home. But beyond Sturgeon Landing, there was a river called the Sturgeon Weir River. That's one name for it. The French called it the Malinge River, or the Maline River. And if you know much French, that's not good. So, and this was kind of what the Sturgeon Weir River looked like. A lot of rapids, did a lot of wading and lining and portaging through the rapids on the Sturgeon Weir. So some rapids bigger than others. This we obviously had to portage. So on the Sturgeon Weir had some nice looking spots on it too, so it wasn't totally bad. So so we again a lot of portages that we carefully portaged around a lot of places, because if you don't portage when you should have portaged, this is what happens. We were headed down, these guys were floating down the river. We earlier had seen a couple of guys in a little red plastic canoe that was intact. If you will notice, the red plastic canoe on this raft is not intact. There's half of it and there's the other half of it. So they had decided not to portage and broken their canoe. Their other friends were headed down to try to get help, and they had most of the stuff that they could salvage on the boat. So a good lesson. And this is the whatever river or lake you're on, this is kind of the ideal campsite. A lot of lichens on the rock for a little padding, and the reflector oven, and a rain fly just in case the rain came up, which it, probably at least a 50% chance it would. So, but this is the typical campsite. So, this was a sight to behold. I think this was still on the Sturgeon River, and we said, okay, we gotta be about to the end of this hard work, and we. We're glad that we were visiting the Indian cemetery and not planted in the Indian cemetery. But there are, quite a few places where there had been Indian village and little cemeteries and other signs of indigenous people there. Even though that, farther down they had been flooded out by the reservoir. Oh, and usually pretty friendly. When we started up the Sturgeon River, however, or the Sturgeon Weir, there was a bridge where there were some delightful little kids on the bridge running back and forth looking at us and waving at us. And then we finally realized that they weren't waving at us, they were throwing rocks at us. But we kept going. I mean, kids are kids anywhere, I guess. So, and this was the Leaf Rapids, Marg? Yeah. Another town, and you think you're out kind of out in the wilderness. Well, we got into Leaf Rapids, and there were pickup campers and picnic tables and a road with traffic. And so we thought, well, civilization is where you find it, I guess. But we were really fortunate at Leaf Rapids to find a guy named Peter Whitehead, who it turns out had been one of the organizers of the 1967 Cross-Canada Canoe Race. And we just were kind of visiting with him, and he said, you know, I think I could help you a little bit. He says, you got some maps? And we said, oh, yeah. And so he got out our maps and started marking on the maps. He said, well, here would be a good campsite. You don't want to camp at that one because it's trashy or there might be bears. You might take the portage on the left rather than the portage on the right because it's a little bit more hazardous. And he was a very friendly, very helpful guy, and we're pretty sure that he saved us probably maybe some days, maybe even longer than that with his advice. So, and the Hudson's Bay Company, again, posts here and there often enough. I think maybe the most we went was about 10 days without being at a town or a Hudson's Bay Company post, but they were scattered here and there along the route. And the Indians, the natives in the area, often would travel into the Hudson's Bay Company post as well, but they were smart. They had their freighter canoes and their motors, and they would be traveling and see us, and they'd sort of shake their heads when they saw these goofy paddlers. And the kids were really curious, you know, at this. I think this is Pelican Narrows, maybe. And we parked the canoe there and went up into the store, and people had said, don't worry, you know, the Indian kids are curious, but they won't bother anything. Well, they were curious enough to jump in our canoe and looking around, but they didn't bother anything. They were just thinking these crazy guys or white people were should have had more sense than to paddle. So, and eventually we worked our way up to this is not quite. This is getting to the Churchill River, but not quite yet. So, speaking of the natives that we ran into, this guy, Angus Sinclair was his name, and is that an Ojibwe or a Cree name? Well, not necessarily, but Angus was the British name, and probably Sinclair as well. But we encountered him once in the evening, and then the next morning we saw him again. He was going out in his canoe overnight to see if he could find a moose, because he wanted to shoot a moose, and he was going to sleep in his canoe all night, and he wasn't going to be troubled with one of those big noisy freighter canoes with the motor, because he was going to be quiet and be moose hunting. The next morning he hadn't got a moose yet, but he wasn't discouraged. He was going to keep trying. So we tried to take pretty good care of our campsites. The natives apparently were a little less concerned about that. We saw several campsites that were frankly pretty junky. So, and the other thing, the Indians often had sled dogs. In the summertime, what do you do with a sled dog? Well, you put them on an island, and if you think about it, you might occasionally go give them a few fish, or if you happen to shoot a deer or something, you might feed them a little bit. But the warning was, don't camp on islands because there likely could be sled dogs on those islands, and they will be hungry. So be careful. So the Indians, as I said, they traveled a little bit different than us white folks. This is a frog portage, which is going between the Sturgeon Weir River and the Churchill River. We came up to the portage, and there were, a couple of canoes. There might have been another canoe yet. Gas cans, boxes of food, just probably a shotgun or two, and just kids running around, and just, they weren't in any special hurry. They were just kind of enjoying the portage. And then here we came up in our canoe with our 3 packs and hopped out, and we're portaging over, efficiently, we thought. And again, they sort of laughed at us, but that was our way of travel versus theirs. And this is Frog Portage. It was, well, in fact, the name of it, you can probably guess it was a little bit soggy here and there, but into the Churchill River chain. So when you get into the Churchill River, then you're going, well, you can go two ways. You can go upstream, which we were doing, or you can go downstream on the Churchill River all the way to Hudson's Bay, to the town of Churchill, which is, other people have done that. So, and the Churchill River is, yes, it's a river, but it's kind of like a lot of the lakes and rivers in the Boundary Waters Canoe area. It's a chain of lakes separated by waterfalls and rapids. So, one of the towns we encountered on the Churchill River was Stanley Mission. And tremendous big church. I think, I'm not sure if it was Anglican or Catholic or what it was, but it had some magnificent stained glass windows in it. And they bragged about those stained glass windows because they said, well, you know, the first set coming from France got lost in the rapids, so we had to get a second set. So they were pretty proud of the ones that survived. And, you know, there was a missionary up in that area named Father Moreau, who went from town to town, probably in his freighter canoe, trying to bring religion to the indigenous people up there. And there were several places where we saw his crosses, they call them Father Moreau's cross, out on a little spit or an island or something like that. So, another Hudson's Bay Company store. And the Hudson's Bay Company, if they didn't have it, you didn't need it. So, you know, a little of everything. Well, food, especially peanut butter and jelly, they almost always would have plenty of peanut butter jelly. Usually would have summer sausage and rye crisp and cheese. Sometimes they didn't have rye crisp, and what are you going to do with peanut butter and jelly if you don't have rye crisp or something to put it on? So, well, Margaret, tell them the answer.
Flour and water.
This is,
In the oven.
we call this elephant ears. Flour and water, and slather the peanut butter and jelly on it, and it's mostly edible. So, but again, the Churchill River, a lot of rapids between the lakes. The voyageurs would, well, sometimes they'd portage and sometimes they'd not. You'll notice the crosses here in this old painting. Maybe this was one of the ones where their people going before them had sadly taught them a lesson about what you really should do at this particular rapid. So, and even up in this, you know, Stanley Mission, up in this area across the Churchill River, there are some roads, or there were probably more now. So, but again, you know, you'd think you were in civilization or in the wilderness, and about the time you thought that, then there would be a little bit of a civilization would pop up. So. We encountered a few other canoeists, a lot more probably indigenous people, fishermen, than we did. Well, yeah, and some white fishermen, you know, European fishermen, but also indigenous Cree or Chippewayan fishermen. But this canoe outfit had paddled in the rain and were absolutely, totally soaked. And so when you get that soaked on a canoe trip and you have a sunny day like this, the first thing you do is take off all your clothes and all your sleeping bags and all your everything and spread it out on the rock to dry. So you really paint the rock. So the one thing that helped on some of these portages on the Churchill River, there were enough Indian fishermen and travelers and trappers that they had to make, or they made portages of their own to get around some of the rapids. And this was a Indian portage that was, it was saplings that they had made sort of a wheeled cart to run up the rails across the portage. We tried it out and decided the wheels needed greasing a little bit. We did get across, but it might have been easier to just portage our own canoe. So this is one of the native fishermen up there. He was pretty proud of his big boat that he had that he used for commercial fishing up in that area of the Churchill River. So. His father, on the other hand, was just as proud of the boat that he had built himself, his canoe. And this canoe was probably, I don't know, 50, 60 years old, but it was still, a usable canoe. So this would be the town of Pachuanak, I think it's called. We, again, another little village along the Churchill River, we decided to stop in and the usual peanut butter and jelly and hope for slab bacon and that at the Hudson's Bay Company. We'd left the canoe down at the dock when we went in. Well, when we came back to the dock, there was a guy down there who had been drinking just a little, or maybe just a lot, and he proceeded to tell us that he didn't like these strangers coming to his community, and you danged Americans are trying to buy Canada, and we ought to at least pay him some money for him to let us use the dock. And then he was grumbling about this pulp mill that was proposed for a place called Dory Lake, which was not too far from there. And I perked up at that because I had got some information, I think, from the Sierra Club and others about Dory Lake, and we were fighting Dory Lake. And I said, oh boy, I don't really like that idea either. They shouldn't tear up your wilderness with a pulp mill at Dory Lake. And he said, oh, you're not so bad guy after all. So we shook hands and we did not part with $10, and we parted company smiling at each other. And to the next, this is again the kind of the ideal campsite on a rock over. I think I might have even caught a walleye off this rock, and am I taking a picture there off that rock? So beautiful country again up in the Churchill River country, quite similar to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area country. This was getting up to closer to the town of Isla La Crosse, where we eventually ended up in a marshy country, not, kind of getting away from the Canadian Shield a little bit, but beautiful little marsh area. In fact, there was a lot of ducks around, and I think a couple of Indian hunters came out and were shooting ducks that evening, just about dark. So. And this is one of our favorite parts in the upper part of the Churchill River. We were needing a lunch break, so we stopped at this hill and walked up the hill to see what was up there, and it was loaded with blueberries. So we spent I don't know how long up there eating blueberries, and other wildlife we saw, loons occasionally. So. More like the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, mosses and lichens, and the beautiful country up there we just absolutely loved. But along about this time, getting towards the end of August, we're getting pretty brown, pretty woolly, pretty good shape, but about time to be headed home. Oh, and catching a few fish too, as a matter of fact. So some people say, oh, did you survive on fish? Well, we didn't survive on fish, but I managed to catch enough to have fairly often fish meals. And you'll never guess what my favorite lure was. I guess that's got a Rapala on there. That's just a plain old Rapala. I had an old perch-colored Basserino that was probably 30 years old at the time, and I think I still got it. But that, I caught muskies, northerns, I think bass, walleyes on that little old Basserino. So, we didn't starve from other reasons either. We found a couple of, around some settlements, in a couple of cases abandoned Indian settlements where there were raspberries galore. So we picked the pails full, and then fresh fish and raspberry cobbler, and that's a hard meal to beat, let me tell you. And we had, tuna, peas, and rice, and macaroni, and oh gosh, we did not starve. We'll put it that way. So we finally got to Ilala Cross on about the last couple of days of August. Well, we had sent ahead to the post office and said, hold our mail if some comes. Well, when we got to Ilala Cross, there was a letter from our friend, a classmate at Coe College, whose, long story, had our car all summer. He had driven it from Coe out to Montana where he lived. And he said, yeah, I'll bring the car up, I'll meet you tomorrow. And we thought about, boy, what about timing? So we found a campsite just on the bay there and camped that night. And the next morning we were kind of sitting up at our campsite on the bay at Ilala Cross and looked out across the gravel road coming into town. Lo and behold, there came our old 1965, anyway, our old station wagon. Pat was coming to get us. So, and that was incredible timing. How that worked out, well, we never know. But at the campsite, we were visiting with another camper there, and well, a couple of guys, and they had been canoeing, and they had a canoe, and the one guy needed to go to North Battlefield, Saskatchewan. He said, gee, can I hitchhike with you guys? And we said, well, yeah, I guess. So we threw his canoe up on the car with our canoe up on the car, and then our two friends who had come to get us, and then all our gear, plus his gear, and we crammed into my old station wagon, and away we went down the road, headed south. You go far enough south down that road, eventually you get to Montana. There might be some livestock on the road. It took us a while to get to Montana, though, because when we got on this old back gravel road going from Saskatchewan to Montana, we were a sight to behold. Our car absolutely jammed with all this stuff. No haircuts or anything for months. This is 1971. We looked kind of like hippies, and we were probably bringing something we shouldn't be bringing. So the rangers there, they probably saw maybe a half a dozen people a day if they were lucky. So we gave them a good excuse to have us unload everything out of the car, look up under the fenders, into the glove compartment, under with the spare tire, in the canoes, into the packs, and we were innocent. So we had a good visit, and about an hour later, we finally got through customs and headed into Montana. So we ended up a little bit different than the Voyagers did on our trip, but that was the short version of a much longer trip. So I very much appreciate everybody's coming and the attention, and if you got time, if we got time, we can handle some questions. So thank you very much.
How many miles was it?
How many miles? We
Just
roughly about 1,200 miles. That does not include the 300 miles where we hitchhiked on the boat going up Lake Winnipeg. So, covered about 1,500 miles in, which we thought was a lot until, the old voyageurs would go, a couple thousand or maybe even 3,000 in a season. So, but, and a lot of it was upstream, a fair amount of it was downstream too. So Jolene, you want to shut the projector off maybe? Just leave the fan on but the light off. There you go. There you go.
Two people you started with.
The people we started with, they're still good friends. They were co-college classmates who had been up to the field station in the Boundary Waters with us. And they went, let's see, I think it was about the 1st of July. I think from about mid-May until the 1st of July, they went with us. And then they decided that it wasn't really their idea of a good time. And so we parted company, not on the best of terms, but they headed back. And then, after a year or two, we said, this is nuts. So we got back together, and we're still very good friends with them.
So you could kind of tell by the photos that maybe they weren't having a good something.
Well,
That's how I would.
and frankly, on the Pigeon River, especially, well, and some of the other places, that first week or 10 days, we had sleet on the canoe, we had rain, we had wind, we had soggy portages, you name it. It wasn't a very fantastic start to a canoe trip. So
Did you have more good days than bad days?
more good days than bad days. Margaret, what do you think?
I just laugh, I don't know.
But I think the photos showed a sample. We had a fair number of rainy days.
Yeah.
We had some windy days.
Awful windy days.
Yeah, some mighty windy days. But we were, how do I want to say? We were a little bit conservative and cautious. If there was a really windy day, we'd just say, well, I guess we're windbound today, and we wouldn't try to fight it. And if there were some portages that were a little rapids that looked a little bit chancy, we decided we would portage, and we hardly ever tried to shoot a rapids. I waded a lot of them going upstream, yeah. So, and long towards the end of the trip, we got to thinking, gee, this we're doing, we're making some decent time, but yeah, we're about ready to be back to civilization. So. Until we got back to civilization, then we said, gee, why did we come back here? Yeah, Mary.
At the end of the day, how long would it take you to set up camp?
How long to set up camp at the end of the day? We got better and better at that as the time went along. So probably, I don't know, half an hour? Not very long. I can show you get the tent out, Mark.
The
So,
dance or the cook kit?
well, either. So,
Cook kit's
but and one of my favorite camps, we pulled into a little, not very big island, and we got the canoe beached, and I got the cook kit out, and did we even get the grate set up? And I said to Margaret, well, if you want to start thinking about supper, I'm going to go catch a fish. Well, I walked around the corner. Come on. I walked around the corner and caught a 3-pound northern or whatever, just enough for the two of us. And I came back and said, well, is supper ready yet? So, but, and we ate, I still don't mind eating northern pike. We ate some walleyes, we ate some northerns, and we sometimes had more than we needed when you get right down to it. So, yeah, Lee.
How many extra paddles did you have, and did you have duct tape on?
Our paddles all survived. We had 3 paddles, and I think we still have all 3 of them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but yeah, and we're like, and again, we were careful. One thing that we did do that probably saved our paddles, on the Sturgeon Weir River, there was a lot of upstream, shallow riffles and rapids. And so I several times cut poles, maybe inch or two in diameter, and we would use those to pole ourselves up the rapids. If I'd have tried to use the canoes or the paddles for that, I'd have probably broken a paddle, and that'd have been the end of it. So yeah, Tom.
How'd you deal with mosquitoes and bugs? Did you have nets or as far as sleeping and all of that?
Yeah, mosquitoes. Yeah, we had head nets. Yeah, we had black flies that you. There's a song about black flies that I won't try to repeat, but you just cuss at the black flies and go on. No-see-ums are the other thing. We had a couple of nights. I think it was around some of those power dams on the Winnipeg River where it was really hot, and the no-see-ums could come right through the tent screen, and you just cuss them, I guess, is about all you do. But yeah, so you deal with them. And maybe we were more tolerant then than we are now. But yeah, so. I might show you a little bit more of our gear. I'm gonna, if I don't, can I take this off? This map? Maybe we could turn on the light back there too. This, one thing I like to talk about, this is the Duluth pack, which is kind of the old standard. You buy them, they're used to, Duluth Tent and Awning Company, and they're durable canvas. And a lot of people will put them on and use the, with the straps. So, but what I like to do on them is put a lot of the weight on my forehead and not have the straps cutting into my shoulders. So we like these the Duluth packs. Our daughter
Doesn't like them.
has graduated. She doesn't like Duluth packs anymore, so she has other kind of paps.
Well, she doesn't like it's a tump line.
Yeah, that's what we call it.
She doesn't like that.
This
I
one,
thought it was helpful.
Yeah.
I would have never made it if I couldn't have leaned into it. Yeah.
if you want to look at this pack later on, at one of the little Indian villages that we stopped at, we kind of parked the canoe down by the water in a little shallow bay there, and we went up to kind of look around the old abandoned Indian village, and we're coming back down, and I thought, what's that noise? There was a kind of a clank around the canoe, and I thought, well, something's down there. So I went running down to the canoe, and just in time to chase a bear out of the canoe who had gotten into the canoe and was, you can see 2 sets of teeth marks here, which he was right trying to get at the can of bacon grease that we had in the pack. So that was our closest encounter with the bear.
That was a big mistake.
That's surprising. The one in the lake and then that one. Was that about the only 2 you saw?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We saw a few other bears. I think we saw
A mom and a couple cubs.
Yeah, a mother and some triplets.
Yeah.
And we saw a couple of moose different times.
Yeah.
Especially up in the Churchill River country, and where there's a lot of native indigenous people. They can shoot whatever they need whenever they need it. Mm-hmm. And so if there's a moose or a deer dumb enough to be out near the lake, they probably get shot. So so we didn't see a lot of that type of animals.
Any caribou?
No caribou. There's, I'm trying to think where there's a place in Western Ontario, Woodland Caribou Provincial Park, which on another trip we went there, but no, we
Didn't see any.
didn't see caribou there, and there supposedly are still caribou up in that area. I can't say that for sure, but so I don't know that we heard any wolves. There might have been once or twice. We did see what we were pretty sure was wolf scat. So, and other wildlife. There was some. A fox was there. There was a fox around one of our campsites one time. So
Real curious.
pretty friendly. Yeah.
He had to investigate
Yeah.
everything.
So, and bald eagles, this is 71. So, we were happy to see bald eagles up there. In 71, you'd have been ecstatic to see a bald eagle at Alcade or around here. Now they're routine. So, trying to think of other critters. Yeah, Pat.
Well, Larry, growing up in Indianola, Iowa, did you know anybody who had done anything like this for inspiration, or where'd that come from?
The inspiration literally came from our summers in the field station, the college field station, Co-College Field Station up on Basswood Lake in the Boundary Waters. Yeah. So, and I'd done just a little bit of canoeing at home, but not much. But I like the outdoors and hunting and fishing, and then when I got up to the lakes of the Boundary Waters, that really kind of tripped the trigger. And then to meet Sigurd Olson as well, who was the a famous writer, wilderness advocate, and a real gem of a guy. That kind of helped get us going too. So
There's books written about the Voyage routes and how they did it, and we read some of those too.
Did you bring the Lonely Land?
I don't think I did.
Yeah. There's a book some of you may have heard of, The Lonely Land by Sigurd Olson, which sort of tells the story of Sigurd Olson and several of his friends who went on a trip. They were smarter. They went up to Eli Cross and went downstream. So, and they got to, I think they pulled out at Cumberland House then. So they spent probably, I think maybe 3 weeks on that trip. But that's a fascinating book. If you're interested in that country, that I would highly recommend that book by Sig Olson. So,
What did you do for drinking water?
drinking water. Usually we had halazone tablets or water purification tablets along. Well, like on the Rainy River below Fort Francis, St. International Falls, we went up to the farmhouse and asked the farmer if we could have some water from their well. So in some cases, we just drink out of the lake up in that area. Seemed like there may have been a few places where we would put Tang or Weiler's drink in the water to kind of cover up the color of it. Sometimes it was just tannin, really rust colored. Sometimes just as clear as it could be. So, but yeah, that wasn't. I guess. Okay. I'm going to back up a little bit. Drinking water, the worst problem we had for drinking water was on Grand Portage, because we decided, okay, we're going to hike Grand Portage. Well, with all our packs and canoes and stuff, we couldn't make the whole 9 miles in one day. So we had to camp on Grand Portage, and I think it would have been the 13th of May or 14th of May. Well, Grand Portage, there was some muddy creek here and there, but not much. But fortunately, there was, fortunately or not, some snow drifts back under the trees along Grand Portage. So we thought, oh, well, yeah, we could melt snow. Has anybody ever tried to melt snow to drink? The Boy Scouts say, don't do that. Well, because it doesn't really end up tasting very good. But yeah, that was, I think, the worst problem we had with finding drinking water. So, yeah.
Did you have to hang your packs on the trees? One of my memories from Boundary Water, trying to get packs up in the trees to keep the bears away from them.
I don't know that we ever hung the packs, did we? We didn't have a problem. And part of that, I think, was in the country, especially up in the Churchill River country and in other areas where there were native people around, a bear's going to get shot. So the bears weren't as well, and they may be not as acclimated to people as they are now, and so now they've learned, oh, there's a canoeist. They probably got some food I can steal. So, but no, we didn't have that problem. We did have other critters getting into our food, like mice and voles that literally came in the tent with us because we made the mistake of having a bag of jerky in the tent. I think sometime when we were, it was one of those really cold, wet times. We brought some food in the tent.
This is one of our food bags. We had the food in a plastic bag inside this bag. Is how we packed it. That's how our professor packed it when he took us on our first field trips, and so that's how we did it. But
Yeah, Mary.
Was language ever a problem? What did the indigenous people speak?
English, pretty much, yeah. And there may have.
we didn't run into French.
We
no.
didn't know. The French, the Canadians were, we were from Ontario West, and I think that there's more French Canadians in the East. So, but I suppose if we pronounced it correctly, the voyageurs, the big 90-pound packs they called pieces, P-I-E-C-E-S. Now, is that how the French would pronounce it?
P-I-E-C.
Peace, just like the word peace.
Pieces.
Oh, I think that's right.
But no, we didn't ever run into them. Oh, there was a few quirks of the Canadians, like you don't go to a drive-in, you go to a wheel-in. And, nice day, eh? Any Canadian friends I'm getting myself in trouble with. So, but yeah, it wasn't really a problem. So, yeah, Faye, hi.
You start out so young and excited and nothing is going to happen to me. No breaks, no sprains, nothing like that. So all this big adventure, were you that incredibly lucky?
Yes.
Yeah, lucky is probably a good word. I don't know that we ever had any injury that was a problem.
We had sore shoulders.
Yeah.
And we'd have to paddle on the same side of the canoe for the other one's shoulder, for most of the day.
No blisters?
No?
Well, probably some. But I wore out the soles of a couple of my boots because, just leather boots in and out, in and out, in and out of the water all the time. Mm-hmm. And I've got some notes in my journal that says that somebody gave me some nails or a screw to put them back together. So, but yeah, we did okay that way. Our friend cut his finger or thumb on an axe, but it wasn't major serious. I mean, we didn't have to sew him up or anything. So, and that one thing I didn't bring, and we shouldn't even have taken it on the canoe trip, was a Hudson's Bay axe. Our prof at Co liked his axe, and so he always had an axe so he could split firewood. Well, in retrospect, that was probably not very smart because that would be a good way to cut your toe or something else. But besides that, it weighed an extra 5 pounds or to drag around in the pack. So, yeah.
And you were gone a long time. I know exactly what I would want. When I'm done with this trip, I have been waiting and waiting for this particular food, this particular meal. Did you and Margaret, oh, when we get back, we're gonna...
Funny you should ask.
What?
I said, funny you should ask.
Yeah.
Tell them about it.
After the weeks, it seemed like, on the Pigeon River, we finally got up to Gunflint Lake. Maybe some of you know about Gunflint Lake. It's in the Boundary Waters Canoe area. There's a Gunflint Lodge up there, and we got in, I forget, weekend or whatever. We got to Gunflint Lodge, and they had candy bars. And I don't know how many candy bars we got today, but it was several. It was several.
I have a comment in my journal about I've never eaten 4 candy bars so fast in my whole life. And Wade had to have a cold Coke.
Oh,
He
yeah.
missed his cold water. Cold, something cold. Not Mountain Dew. Whatever they had, we take it.
Oh, and I had, I forget which town it was, but they had milkshakes or malts. And I was craving a milkshake or malt, and they were terrible. It was really good. They were not good Iowa Dairy Queen malts. They were pretty pathetic, yeah. So, yeah.
So what do you actually do for a living? Did you have a career and were you a professor?
Let's see, how much time you got?
Or you can get away for this trip.
Okay.
Take off that long.
When I started my job at the Des Moines Register as their farm reporter in 1971, I interviewed for the job, and I told the managing editor at that time, well, I really like to have the summer off because we've got this canoe trip planned. And I was sort of interviewing, hoping to move into the outdoor writer job after the farm department job. So, sure enough, along came the 1st of May. I had the summer off from the Des Moines Register, and we had that whole time. One of the reasons that we didn't go any farther on the trip was that I had to be back Labor Day to start up again at the Des Moines Register. So that's what I did. And I was sorely disappointed when I got back to the Register Labor Day and they said, oh, your farm department job is no longer here, but I guess you can have the night police beat. Well, luck would have it, I finally, the following spring, got the outdoor writer job at the Register then, so which I continued that for 25 years. And then after that, I've been depending on Margaret to support me.
She says yes.
And Margaret, by the way, we knew we were going to do this canoe trip in the spring, and so Margaret had the option of starting work in a medical lab, where she's a medical technologist, or the option of getting us prepared for our canoe trip by, sewing food bags or sewing cook kit covers or all those kind of things.
Tent fly,
yeah, and that. So then when when we got back in the fall, then Margaret started to work in the medical lab in Des Moines. So that's ancient history almost.
The hospital isn't even there anymore.
So, yeah.
So, can you explain how you bake that cobbler and that contraption there?
The reflector oven?
Yeah, the reflector oven.
You want to take it apart?
Sure, if I can remember. We carried this thing along on the whole trip.
Well, it saved you.
Yeah. This is a well-traveled reflector oven. I don't know if any of you have used these or not, but what you do set it up like this. Okay.
Put that against the rock.
Set it up like that, and you build the fire down here, and then put you probably don't want a flaming fire, you want some good hot coals, and you put them down here. And we improvised with a little bit of a lid on our oven to kind of keep it going.
Keep the heat in.
Yeah. But yeah, so it can work pretty well.
And we found a skillet that fits in there.
The skillet just fit.
And how long would it take?
Depends on how hot the
It was 350 or 400.
Yeah, right. We didn't burn a whole lot. Sometimes you burn this front edge of something when it got too hot, but it worked pretty good.
Margaret had along her recipe book, and it said, okay, 275 degrees for 23 minutes, and she followed it very carefully.
We carried Bisquick, and we could get that in most of the Hudson's Bay stores.
I guess you probably saw these hats, or maybe you didn't in any of the pictures. This
one was my dad's.
Good old felt hat.
Yes.
You'd be surprised how much rain these things will shed, a lot. So, and if in the summertime and you decide your head's hot, you just take them and dip them in the water and have the water running down over your head, and you're doing okay. So,
This was my dad's Sunday hat.
Okay.
He didn't want me to go on the trip, so that was his hat. He tried to talk us out of it, but.
I don't remember seeing any life jackets in any of your pictures. Did you have life jackets?
We did. And in fact, there was one of the pictures where we were paddling, and I said, you know what, I really should have had life jackets on in that picture, but yeah.
A lot of those windy days, we did wear them.
Yeah. So.
But he wasn't taking pictures then.
Oh, and some maps. We had, I don't know how many maps, but they are 4 miles to the inch, topographic maps from the Canadian government. And 4 miles to the inch is fairly small when you get right down to it. But we learned to use them and pretty much hardly ever got lost. There may have been a time or two when we had to reconnoiter a little bit. But yeah, basically we still got rolls and rolls and rolls of maps at home.
Sometimes you just need one little corner of that whole map. That's the only part that you needed, but you had to take the whole map.
No GPS or satellite phones or anything like that. So, yeah.
Did you say the portages were marked on the map?
In a lot of cases, they were marked, yeah. Not always, but in a lot of cases. And most of our maps are pretty well marked up now with all the places where we ate lunch, where the portage was. And the guy we met, Peter Whitehead, marked them for us. He said, okay, here's a campsite, here's a portage, so yeah. And you come to a rapids, usually, often, not always, but often the portage will be pretty obvious. If it's a well-traveled route, people use it and it's pretty well marked. That wasn't always the case on the Pigeon River when the water was 3 or 4 feet higher than it was supposed to be and things like that. But basically the portages are been used for, well, literally centuries. The height of the fur trade was in the late 1700s into the early 1800s, and then they had been portages then from game trails and from Native American or Native Canadians, so they were pretty well marked. They're pretty well used. So well, again.
Larry.
Yeah. Oh.
Did you ever dump your canoe?
No,
No.
did not. Did not. So, I'm trying to think. Yeah. No, we literally never did. Yeah.
Your canoe had one of those little with a keel.
Well, they said they were
stuck down by the beach now.
Yes, we haven't had, this old aluminum canoe had a keel, and that keel sometimes can be a keeler. If you hit a rock with it, it'll catch you, but no, we did okay. Yeah.
Was it a shoe keel or a regular?
No, we just had a standard 17-foot Grumman with a regular keel. Yeah. 75-pound Grumman. So,
Right. And
those were the days when I could put the 30-pound pack on my back and throw the 75-pound Grumman up on my shoulders and go over to Portage. And that was a long time ago.
Make it all in one trip?
Usually not. I don't think there was hardly ever a Portage that we just made in one trip. It would usually, we had 3 packs and fishing rods and map case and
Camera case.
paddles. Camera case. I didn't think camera case. Big camera case we were hauling along, and so it
wouldn't be my
it was a couple of trips. But when you consider how efficient we were
And it wouldn't
compared
take
to
me
the natives up there who were carrying gas cans and shotguns and all that, we thought we did pretty well.
And you still there with
What's that?
Margaret did the water and flower, did you call it Bannock?
Bannock, yeah.
You still canoe?
Yeah, we're getting slower and slower.
Don't have the over our head muscles.
Yeah. But we occasionally, our daughter is an avid canoeist, and she's up in western Wisconsin, and we've been to the Boundary Waters just for a short day trip, as long as we've got her to help us get in and out of the canoes and put the canoes up in the car and those sort of things. But Faith.
I just want, you have all these fabulous pictures in your journals and, so many good memories. But I just wondered if you found one thing on this trip that's like your talisman, we're going to take this back to remember our trip by, like a precious stone.
No, that would wait
Oh,
too
gosh.
much.
Larry, she's right there. That's your precious stone, right?
I'm not sure what that would be, I guess. The pictures, yeah.
Yeah, probably the pictures. Or the journal, yeah.
the journal.
And the journals, yeah. In fact, we got distracted this last week getting out our old journals and reading through those again. Some of the things the crazy things we did and
how hard we were working.
Every
night we're pooped.
Oh, I bet. I can't imagine. Yeah.
But we still like that old tent that we slept in. I bought that tent first in 1968 in Missoula, Montana, and Margaret modified it considerably to make it into with a rain fly and
I added the rain fly.
And so, but yeah, in fact, I've still been known to sleep in it.
I don't know, it's pretty crunchy now. I'm not sure.
So.
And these are our sleeping bags. We had 2 of these.
Yeah.
For the down bags?
Down bags.
We took down bag that we could.
Yeah, and we had made liners for them, so you could wash the liner and didn't have to wash the bag. It made it harder to stuff it and it made it heavier, but that was nice. And when it was really hot, it was really a good sheet over you rather than having the whole down bag all over you. So they worked out good even though they were heavier.
Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.